Hi there. To debug story paths in Storybook, we need a trimmed preview stats JSON file. If you don't already have your stats file generated, watch our video in the link above that walks through how to prepare your local environment for debugging TurboSnap. Here in my subdir static directory, I've got a trimmed preview stats JSON file. Chromatic has a trace utility that you can use to figure out the exact relative path for your file dependency graph and how to set your CLI flags correctly so that TurboSnap begins detecting file changes. In your terminal, run the command mpx chromatic at latest trace and then the name of your file with the specific static subdirectory that you're pointing to, and it's important to include the name of the stats file at the end with the trimmed in it. So I have my command here, and I'm going to run it. And you can see here in the output in the logs, let me increase that a little bit, that we have no traced stories for this specific file. Yet I know that in my stats file I do have stories. So this is because the file exists in a subdirectory, and we run the command from our root directory. We can alter the script slightly by adding a -b flag and the path to the base directory. The base directory is relative to the nested storybook. So I'll run the previous command and I'll add a -b subdir at the end that specifies my subdirectory. And when I do that, I now get one trace change to two affected story files. So because I added the subdirectory and told Chromatic and also TurboSnap where to look, I'm able to find those file relationships and those affected stories. The B flag translates to the CLI flag storybook base dir, or if you're using the GitHub action, it's just storybook base dir without the double hyphens in front of the storybook base dir. Also, if you want more info, you can add the flag -m expanded, which will output all the subdependencies that connect the traced file to the affected stories. I've gone ahead and added a -m expanded at the end of this script, and if I run it, it will not only give me a bunch of logging information, it will also expand any of these tree structures with the file changes and the specific stories that are affected. The command also outputs additional logging to give you some idea of what directories are set and which files are being traced. As you can see here, it outputs the base directory, the root directory, the storybook config directory, all to help with debugging. Another option that is extremely useful to test with the trace utility is the untraced flag. This flag tells TurboSnap not to exit out and run a complete build because of a global file change, such as a package.json file or a barrel file like an index.ts. If you run the command mpx chromatic at latest trace and also append the -u, which is the short version for untraced, with your specific file, and the double asterisks are a glob pattern that PicoMatch uses under the hood to determine it kind of reduces the complexity of having to add the absolute path or the relative path of the file. So this will tell us that now we are untracing the 1.jsx file, and so we should no longer see any traced results in the output. As you can see here, in my messaging, I've got traced one change file to 0 affected story files because I'm no longer tracing that file. And I also get some helpful logging that tells me that I untraced a specific file. And this is a great way to test so you don't have to keep rerunning CI builds to determine that the untraced is working correctly or what's going on. You will typically only use the untraced flag for global files such as a root package.json or a subdirectory package.json or storybook config files, and only if they change often and result in TurboSnap exiting out of the trace, because TurboSnap exits when any of these files change, as they cannot be traced to affected stories. Adding the untraced flag will exclude the file from the dependency trace, so it should be used sparingly to avoid visual regressions.